Right, I've come to talk to you about this, or rather the Oxford Flood Network. The Oxford Flood Network started as a blog post, as a lot of these things do. The rest are pub conversations, that's how the other lot start. This was about what I called guerrilla sensor networks. So, an example would be the Safecast network in Japan. So in response to the Fukushima disaster, a group of people actually set up a series of Geiger counters attached to the internet and produced their own heat map of radiation around Japan. Mine's slightly less dangerous, it's simply flooding. So this is exactly the model you see there, but actually in situ underneath the bridge. I think the next model won't have wires hanging out of it. It's there are issues with that, but this is in a friendly location with a nearby geek who has internet access. So a good place for a first prototype. But one of the things that this is about monitoring flooding. Obviously, we've had some of the worst floods in living memory, I guess. The idea was around before that as a generic way to build sensor networks for your own cause. So, for example, the radiation network, there's air quality networks, there's flood network. I'm not the one who's going to make the generic platform, electronics platform, to make this happen. But I did feel that this was bigger than just Oxford and bigger than just flooding. So bear that in mind when you're looking at the electronics. Simple things, really. How does it work? This is an ultrasound sensor with a small radio attached to it. The sensor, as you see, got it on here. The sensor bounces ultrasound off the water and tells how far away the water is, and then you work out how far away the water is. If the water is 0 away, it's probably flooded. Unless the bridge is much higher, and then you have to work out, it doesn't actually matter how far away the water is, it matters how far away the water is when things flood. This is sensor type 1. Sensor type 2 might be one of these water gauges, actually in the water. Could be flow sensors, any number of things, LiDAR if you can afford it, or radar. The main thing is that this is actually rather big. This is more like the size that you need to actually do it, and this is a perfectly legitimate sensor device. This one is the first box that came to hand, and you can see heavy use of a glue gun there. We'll come to what skills I need help with later, but that's one of them. One of the benefits of something this size is you can actually stick it under a floor void. So a lot of the water that comes up in Oxford actually comes up through the floor. It doesn't come down the street and through the door. It actually comes up the toilet and up through the floorboards, and it's pretty horrible. A lot of neighbours have little floorboards they lift up, and then someone comes around and says, how high is the water? And they tell each other and sort of spread the information. That's a job for a sensor, surely. And once you've put it on the internet, then everyone else can share that. And the more sensors you put out there, you get a higher level of detail, higher resolution of mapping. So the Environment Agency already logged this kind of stuff, but they have these massive things called stilling wells, which are concrete constructions with a rodent-proof pipe out to the water and some kind of GSM logger and all sorts of stuff like that. These will cost you probably something like 15 quid if you put this together yourself. The sensor, for the ultrasonic sensor, a little bit extra on top of that. So this is all you need to do to build it, is, I say all you need, but the idea is that we do the hard part of the electronics and then publish the plans as open source and the software as open source. But more importantly, the protocol. So then you can build your own using whatever you like, as long as it interoperates. So you can see here we've got 4 batteries. We've got an Arduino, a small radio there, and an ultrasonic rangefinder. And the gateway is everyone's favourite Raspberry Pi there. We use that just because it's a very quick way of getting on the internet with simple electronics. Node-RED, this is more of a, who knows about Node-RED? Oh, there's a few people. Node.js implementation of a sort of drag and drop programming language makes it easy for someone like me who doesn't want to have to learn loads of programming languages each week. There is another element to it which is not really particularly relevant here, but for this kind of project, I think could transform what you can do. So instead of this small device here having to connect to a gateway device that's attached to someone's broadband, so it has to be within a couple of 100 meters, this new technology called TV Whitespace will allow you to connect over a few kilometers to your devices. So then it moves away from individuals having individual sensors and connections and moves it into a blanket of coverage that lots of people can join. A bit like a mobile network, except who owns the network? Now this is where the community comes in. The community's got the shared interests. The community is trying to solve the same problem, and it's roughly the same geographical coverage as a white space network. So you could build this network as a community and then put sensors within it. So that's what a white space radio looks like. It looks like a TV antenna with a little box attached to it. It's very simple. I'm going to skip over the slide about TV spectrum, but basically there's not much spectrum out there for Wi-Fi. There's an absolute shed load of it for TV, and that's the stuff that we could use. So where do you come in? Why am I telling you all this? Basically, we need help. We are at early days. We've got a simple prototype. We've got a second prototype, which is actually made of, there's a printed circuit board that's been designed. But what we want to do is move beyond the technology. So we've got a few people who know the electronics, a few people who know the low-level hardware programming. But we don't really know how you would take this from a technical group, interest group, into a geographical interest group. How do you make it self-sustaining? The group who actually care about whether it's flooded are the ones who are most likely to sustain it. It kind of goes back to what David was saying earlier about after a hack day, you get hack day rot. Everything starts falling to pieces because someone's not paying for their Amazon instance anymore, they wanted it for some other project, and gradually the whole thing falls to pieces. That's what you don't want to happen in a community sensor network. Otherwise, there's just a bunch of electronics out there blurring, bleating noises out, and no one's actually listening. I think another thing that's important for gaining a bit of support for this is asymmetric sensor networks. So these are going to happen no matter what. These are going to happen to us. And I would much rather be on the side of us also doing them so that we have alternative data to provide as a counter to what other people are collecting about us. So with the smart city, you might expect that your councils are installing smart street lamps which know how fast the traffic's passing by them, or maybe they've got, they know how many people are walking across the paving slabs. This is all data collected about us by someone else. And it's very asymmetric. Lots and lots of information about us. We have to plead for open licenses to go and view that data. Why not generate your own for your own problems? And actually, that does come with, if you like, it comes with an agenda of its own. So I think that was something that I thought about in your Friends of the Earth talk, is that your data has an agenda. Is it believable? Is it politicized if you have too much of a political message behind it? These are all really interesting questions that come out of this movement of citizen data. What is your data about? What's your data's agenda? So all rather tough, gnarly questions. I'll go back to this. We still need your help. Actually, I forgot to mention, back in November, the Sustainability Hack Day, SUSHack, was actually hijacked by me, to build the entire thing. I felt a little bit guilty at the time, but not so much now. But we built a sensor, a gateway, the database, an application on top of it, and actually had someone waving their hand in front of the sensor, and it showed that there was flooding in a random part of Oxford. That was done in 12 hours, wasn't it? 12 hours, including him and him. It got Hack Day rot. We went away from it. The code still exists, but it's not running anywhere. If anyone has experience of how to transition into operating code from a hack day, that's the kind of thing we need. Practical help for, if anyone knows how to make boxes better than this thing, that's a good one to start with. And we've got lots of locations. Luckily, a lot of these locations are by the river, and a lot of them are pubs, which is pure accident, I promise you. So there is a Google group, that's what it's called. There's a Google group, it is a mailing list. It comes and goes as these things do, there's a lot of lurkers around. It's mostly about electronics, which has probably put a lot of people off, but ultimately, and it's about soldering antennas back on, I hope. I seem to have just lost one there. There is a Twitter group. It confused a lot of the locals in Oxford when they thought they were going to get lots of interesting flooding information, and they got lots of electronics information. So it's got some way to go to become something less about the technology. But that's really what I want to see, is that it's no longer about the technology. If you're a GitHub kind of person, there's code out there. And there's also, I think there's a hack day coming up. It's the Swarm, Citizen Social Science Swarm Hack Day. And that will explore some of these ideas of transition to normal people, I guess, from technical communities. So if anyone wants to go along to that, I won't be able to make it, sadly, but it's about this kind of thing. And if anyone knows about funding, that's also, of course, welcome. But obviously you want to pay these guys first, because they asked. And that's me.